The offering. Commander Elias Reeves stood stiffly in the grand chamber of the Viridian Nexus, trying to hide his discomfort under the scrutiny of a dozen pairs of iridescent eyes. The Viridian High Council surrounded him in their floating gravity seats, their scaled skin reflecting the pale blue light of the chamber. After 3 years of bloody conflict across 3 star systems, the war between humanity and the Viridian Collective had finally ended with an uneasy peace treaty. As a symbol of our newfound harmony, announced High Counselor Zeth, his voice a melodious hum that filled the chamber. The Viridian Collective offers a gift to the United Earth Forces. Elias shifted his weight, already wary. Viridian gifts were notoriously complicated affairs, often loaded with symbolic meanings that could trigger diplomatic incidents if mishandled. We bestow upon you, Commander Reeves, a personal assistant from our elite service caste. Zeth continued, gesturing to a side door that silently slid open. A female Viridian entered, and Elias couldn't hide his surprise. Unlike the High Council members with their imposing height and scales, she was smaller, almost human-sized, with only the faintest shimmer of scales along her temples and forearms. Her skin was a pale lavender, and her eyes were large, silver, and unmistakably terrified. As they landed on him, "This is Terra," Zeth announced proudly. "Educated in your language and customs, she will serve as your personal companion and cultural liaison." Elias fought to keep his expression neutral. Personal companion. This wasn't a gift, it was a person. "Council member, with respect, our species doesn't practice." "It is decided," Zeth interrupted smoothly. "To refuse would be unfortunate for our newly established peace." The threat was thinly veiled. Elias glanced at Terra again, noticing how she trembled slightly despite her rigid posture. This wasn't just a diplomatic complication, it was a hostage situation disguised as a gift. "I accept your generosity," Elias said carefully, knowing he needed to get her away from here before deciding his next move. The journey back to his ship, the Artemis, was conducted in uncomfortable silence. Terra followed 3 steps behind him, her movements graceful but hesitant. When they reached the shuttle bay, she froze at the entrance. "It's all right," Elias said, keeping his voice gentle. "It's just a short trip to my ship." Terra's silver eyes darted between him and the shuttle. Will it be quick?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "About 15 minutes," Elias replied, puzzled by her question. Once aboard, Terra took the seat furthest from him, her posture impossibly straight, hands folded in her lap. Elias sighed and initiated the launch sequence. "Look," he said as they cleared the Viridian docking bay, "I want to be clear about something. You're not my property. Once we're far enough from Viridian space, I can arrange transport to wherever you want to go." Terra stared at him, her expression a mixture of confusion and disbelief. "You would release me?" "Of course. I'm not in the habit of keeping people against their will." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Is this a test of my compliance?" "No test, just the truth." Terra continued to stare at him for a long moment before speaking again. "The High Council said humans value efficiency, that you would find me useful before consumption." Elias nearly choked. "Before what?" "Consumption," she repeated as though stating the obvious. "We have been told the humans consume other sentient species to absorb their knowledge and strength." Elias felt his jaw drop. That's absolutely not true. We don't eat other species, especially not sentient ones." Terra's expression didn't change. The educational broadcasts showed humans feasting on the flesh of other creatures. "Your teeth are designed for tearing meat." "Yes, we eat animal protein, but not sentient beings," Elias explained, realizing the depth of the propaganda she'd been fed. "Look, I promise you, no one on my ship is going to eat you." "Then why accept me as a gift?" she challenged, a hint of courage breaking through her fear. "Because refusing would have been seen as an insult that could jeopardize the peace treaty," Elias answered honestly. "I couldn't lead you there, but I have no intention of keeping you prisoner." The shuttle docked with the Artemis, and Elias led Terra through the airlock. He could feel the stares of his crew as they passed, but a quick warning glance kept them from asking questions. "This will be your quarters," he said, stopping at a standard crew cabin. "There's a lock on the inside. Use it if it makes you feel safer." Terra surveyed the room cautiously. "These are not holding cells." "No, they're regular quarters. Food synthesizer there, sanitation unit through that door." He paused, watching her absorb the information. "Are you hungry?" She stiffened immediately. "Why do you ask?" "Because it's been a long day, and most beings need to eat after long days," Elias replied patiently. "I will not be fattened for slaughter," she said firmly. Elias rubbed his temples, feeling a headache forming. "Okay, let's try this again. I'm not going to eat you. No one on this ship is going to eat you. We don't eat sentient beings." Terra's expression suggested she didn't believe him but was unwilling to argue further. "Fine." Elias sighed. "Rest. I'll check on you later." The next morning, Elias found Terra already awake, examining the food synthesizer with cautious curiosity. "It's programmed with basic Viridian nutrition profiles," he explained, making her jump slightly. "Sorry, didn't mean to startle you." "I thought you would come during the sleep cycle," she said quietly. "Why would I?" Elias began, then stopped, realizing what she meant. "No, that's not. I wouldn't." He took a deep breath. "Look, Terra, I understand you've been taught to fear humans, but I swear to you, we're not what the Viridian Council portrayed us to be." Before she could respond, the ship's alert system blared. "Commander to Engineering," came Lieutenant Chen's voice over the comm. "We've got a problem with the secondary coolant system." "On my way," Elias replied, then turned to Terra. "Will you be okay here?" She nodded stiffly, and Elias hurried toward engineering. The situation was worse than he'd expected. A micrometeorite had punctured the outer hull, damaging the secondary coolant loop. Without it, the main engines would overheat within hours. "We need to reroute through the tertiary system," Elias told Chen. "But that junction box is in Access Tunnel 4B. It's too narrow for any of us to reach." "I can help." Elias turned to find Terra standing in the doorway, her silver eyes taking in the situation with surprising calculation. "You shouldn't be here," Elias started. "Your engineer's distress signal was ship-wide," she explained. "And I have experience with thermal systems. Viridians are smaller than humans. I can reach the junction." Elias hesitated only briefly. "Show her what needs to be done," he told Chen. 20 minutes later, Terra emerged from the access tunnel, covered in hydraulic fluid but successful. The coolant system stabilized, and the warning klaxons fell silent. "Thank you," Elias said sincerely. "You didn't have to help us." Terra looked at him curiously. "If the ship failed, I would die as well." "Still, I appreciate it." He gestured to her stained clothing. "Let's find you something clean to wear." As they walked back toward the crew quarters, Terra broke the silence. "You could have ordered me into the tunnel, used me as a tool to fix your ship." "That's not how we do things," Elias replied. "People aren't tools, even enemies." "You're not my enemy, Terra." She studied him with those unsettling silver eyes. "Perhaps not, but I am still not convinced you aren't planning to consume me eventually." Elias couldn't help but laugh, which made Terra flinch. "Sorry, it's just, the idea is so absurd to me. How about this? I'll eat the same food as you, from the same synthesizer. Would that help convince you?" Terra considered this. It would be a start. It wasn't much, but it was progress. As they continued down the corridor, Elias realized that changing Terra's deeply ingrained beliefs would take time. But the fact that she'd helped save his ship, that she'd chosen to help rather than hide, gave him hope that understanding between them wasn't impossible. Understanding. The Artemis cut through the darkness of space, its engines humming with renewed efficiency after Terra's repairs. 3 days had passed since she'd boarded the ship, and while she still watched Elias with wary eyes, she had begun to emerge from her quarters more frequently, observing the crew with careful attention. Elias found her in the observation deck, staring out at the star field, her delicate fingers tracing patterns on the transparent aluminum as though connecting constellations. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he said, keeping a respectful distance. Terra nodded without turning. "The stars look different from here. On Viridia, they teach us that each light is the eye of an ancestor, watching to ensure we uphold the collective's values." "What do they say about humans?" Elias asked, genuinely curious about the propaganda that had shaped her worldview. Terra hesitated before answering. "They say humans are descendants of apex predators who never evolved past their hunger. That your expansion across the stars is driven by an insatiable appetite for resources and dominance." She finally turned to face him. "They showed us images of your history, of wars and violence and consumption of flesh. Much of our history isn't pretty," Elias admitted. "We've made terrible mistakes, but we've learned from them, too. And the part about eating sentient beings, that's never been true." "Then why did the Council insist?" "Fear," Elias said simply. "It's easier to fight an enemy if you believe they're monsters." Terra considered this, her silver eyes reflecting the starlight. "I have been watching your crew. They consume plants and synthesized proteins. No one has attempted to taste me." Elias couldn't suppress a smile. "Consider that significant evidence for my case." A small crease appeared between Terra's brows, the closest thing to a smile he'd seen from her. The moment was interrupted by Lieutenant Chen's voice over the comm. "Commander, we're picking up a distress signal from a merchant vessel in Sector 4. Set intercept course," Elias ordered, then turned to Terra. "Would you like to come to the bridge? See how we handle this?" Her eyes widened slightly at the invitation. "I would be permitted. You're not a prisoner, remember." On the bridge, the crew worked efficiently to track the distress signal. Terra stood quietly beside Elias's command chair, observing everything with keen attention. "Visual contact established," announced the tactical officer. "It's a Tyrillian transport, sir. Looks like they've been boarded." The view screen showed a bulky cargo vessel drifting in space, a smaller, predatory-looking ship attached to its hull like a parasite. "Pirates," Elias muttered. "Hail them." No response came from either ship. Elias turned to his security chief. "Prepare a boarding team. Non-lethal measures only. There may be survivors." "Is this wise?" Terra asked quietly. "The pirates could be dangerous." "That's exactly why we need to help," Elias replied. "I won't leave innocent people to die if we can save them." To his surprise, Terra straightened her posture. "I would like to accompany the boarding team." "Absolutely not," Elias said immediately. "It's too dangerous. I can access areas humans cannot," she countered. "And Viridians can sense thermal signatures through walls. I could help locate survivors." Elias studied her determined expression. "Why would you want to risk yourself?" "To understand," she replied simply. 20 minutes later, Elias led a boarding team that included Terra onto the Tyrillian vessel. The interior was dark, emergency lighting casting eerie shadows along the corridors. They moved silently, following Terra's subtle hand signals as she detected heat signatures ahead. They found the first bodies in the cargo bay. 3 pirates, clearly killed by their own companions in some dispute. The Tyrillian crew had been rounded up in the mess hall, bound and terrified but alive. 4 more pirates in the bridge, Terra whispered to Elias, her silvery eyes unfocused as she concentrated on the thermal readings. "They're preparing to detach with the valuable cargo." Elias nodded and motioned for his team to split up. The ensuing firefight was brief but intense. When it ended, the pirates were subdued, and the Artemis crew had suffered only minor injuries. As they escorted the captured pirates back to the Artemis, one spat at Terra's feet. "Viridian traitor," he snarled in broken standard. "Working with the meat-eaters now." Terra froze, and Elias felt a chill run down his spine. "What did you say?" he demanded of the pirate. The man laughed, a harsh sound. Everyone knows the story the Viridian Council tells its people. Keeps them scared, keeps them loyal. Your little pet there probably still thinks you're going to marinate her for dinner. Elias glanced at Tara, whose expression had gone carefully blank. Is that true? Is that propaganda deliberately spread by your leaders? She didn't answer until they were back aboard the Artemis, the pirates secured in the brig, and the rescued Tyrrellians receiving medical attention. Yes, she finally admitted, sitting across from Elias in his quarters. The High Council controls all information. From birth, we are taught that humans are savage predators who consume other species to gain their power. She looked down at her hands. I never questioned it until now. And now? Elias asked softly. Now I wonder what else they lied about, she whispered. Why they really gave me to you. Elias leaned forward. I've been wondering the same thing. You're not just a service case member, are you? Tara's eyes snapped up to meet his. What do you mean? The way you handled yourself during the boarding action. Your knowledge of ship systems. The respect the Council showed you despite supposedly offering you as a servant. You're something more. For a long moment, Tara was silent. Then, with a deep breath, she straightened. I am Tara Vel-Saren, daughter of Council member Zarin. My father opposed the war with humans from the beginning. When peace was finally achieved, there were factions who wished to sabotage it. And you were what? A hostage to ensure Earth's good behavior. Elias asked, pieces falling into place. A spy, technically, she admitted. I was to observe and report on human military capabilities, but also a sacrifice, if necessary, if relations deteriorated again. They sent their own council member's daughter. Elias was aghast. My father didn't know, Tara said quickly. He believes I volunteered as a cultural ambassador. The High Council, they use fear to control not just the populace, but their own members. Elias sat back, processing this revelation. So all this time, you were supposed to be gathering intelligence on us. Yes, she acknowledged. But instead, I've discovered that everything I was taught about humans was a lie. A week later, as the Artemis approached the neutral trading hub at Arcturus Station, Elias found Tara in the mess hall, engaged in animated conversation with Lieutenant Chen about Earth's diverse ecosystems. She looked up as he entered, and for the first time, she smiled at him, a genuine expression that transformed her face. Commander, she greeted him. I was just learning about your rainforests. There's something to see, Elias agreed, sitting down beside them. In fact, I was coming to talk to you about that. We'll reach Arcturus tomorrow. You'll have choices to make. Tara's smile faded. You still wish me to leave? Not at all, Elias said quickly. But as I promised from the beginning, the choice is yours. You can take passage back to Viridia, or to any other world. Or, he hesitated. You could stay aboard the Artemis, as a cultural liaison, for real this time. We could use someone with your insights. And my father? She asked quietly. I sent a secure message through diplomatic channels. He knows you're safe and what the Council intended. He's arranging some political changes back home. Tara absorbed this information, her silver eyes thoughtful. For so long, I feared humans would consume me, she said softly. I never imagined you would instead free me. That's what humans actually do best, Elias told her. Not consuming, but liberating. Ourselves and others. Then I would like to stay, Tara decided. There is much I still need to learn about humans, and much I can teach you about my people, the truth, not the Council's propaganda. As the Artemis continued its journey through the stars, Tara stood on the observation deck, watching the universe unfold before her. The fear that had once consumed her had been replaced by curiosity and hope. Beside her stood Elias, no longer a monster from her nightmares, but a friend who had shown her compassion when she expected only cruelty. Together, they represented something powerful, the possibility that understanding could overcome fear, that different species could see beyond the histories and prejudices that divided them, and that sometimes the most meaningful peace began with a single act of kindness. The vast expanse of space stretched before them, filled with stars that were no longer the watchful eyes of ancestors, but endless possibilities for discovery. And as they stood side by side, human and Viridian, they knew their journey together was only beginning.